Sarı köpek sağlam. Benim hayvanda var ya, sarı güzel köpek, sarı güzel köpek. Günlük yaşayan bir insan hayatında çok zengin oldu.
Hello.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi.
I have the same virtual background. Let me
This is my grassroots advertising.
it works for
Hi,
me. Thanks, Jared.
Oh, you are welcome. I'll let you guys get to it. Do either of you have any questions before you get started?
They can is there a Stray movie website, or where do they go to find out where virtual cinemas, right?
I can send that to you. Yeah,
You
exactly.
want to plug that into the chat room,
Sure.
chat rather, and then I'll be able to mention that too. But
yeah,
I know it's going to be at Film Forum, for example, which is nice. Anyway.
Yeah, and then the only other thing is, Adam, I'll just give you a little time check as we're coming up on about 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Hi.
Hi. And this is going to be a video recording, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can really. There's Zaytine. How do you pronounce that?
Zayton.
Zayton. So there's Zayton in the background on your poster, right?
Yeah.
Your star.
Mm-hmm.
Canine star. Well, hello. You're in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I'm here for the pandemic.
Understood. And I'm just upstate in the Hudson Valley of New York State. Are you typically live in New York, or where do you typically live?
Typically, I live in Los Angeles, but I'm trying.
LA?
Yeah, but I'm trying to move back to New York somehow.
Okay. Well, we gladly welcome you back to New York.
I hope I can make it back.
If you're able
there.
to make that.
Independent film is the best there. The theaters that exist there, nothing beats it.
I think for documentary filmmakers, it's the easiest place to live because there's such a community and network of people there.
Yeah.
Susan Norgate is there. Film Forum is there.
Yeah.
Magnolia Pictures is there.
Yep.
Unless maybe they have an LA office that I'm not aware of. They probably have some satellite thing going on over there, is my guess, right? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
I enjoyed Stray. As soon as I kind of heard about it, actually, I said, "Oh, let me get Elizabeth on and talk to her about her documentary." And at first, it's essentially it's your film, right? And hop in any time to correct or modify what I say, please. Mm-hmm. It's about this. It takes place on the streets of Istanbul, Turkey. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sort of the POV of 3 dogs, maybe mainly Zayton, but there's two other dogs. There's Nazar and Kartal. Again, correct my pronunciation. I assume these are Turkish names.
Yeah, they are.
And well, I have a couple of Turkish friends who will probably now banish me from their for mispronouncing names, Turkish names. I'll beg their forgiveness. And as I was watching, I'm like, how did she shoot this? There's no camera on the dog, and yet we're following the dog around, and nobody seems to be all that curious about this camera. They're all nonplussed by. I'm talking about citizens on the streets
Yeah,
of the city. They
yeah.
don't seem to raise an eyebrow. So I did read ultimately about how you did it, but I want you to kind of talk about that whole process of, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit in terms of why you made the film about the dogs, but I'm sure you've talked about that at great length. But I'm kind of curious. First, let's start with just how you arrived and the technical choices you made.
Yeah, for sure. I originally did try to figure out like GoPro rigs for the dogs, but I couldn't figure out how to stabilize them on the dogs. And so the
That's
footage
a
would
big
come
deal.
back, yeah, like really like too much. It would have been way too intense for audiences if it were just like shaking on a dog the whole time. And also sound, of course, was really important to this film because part of the concept was the film was these overheard conversations as the dogs wander through the city. So I ended up figuring out this rig that was like an easy rig. And it's this thing called an easy rig where it hangs a lot of the weight from the camera and the gimbal stabilizer that the film was filmed on onto my waist instead of my hands. And then with that, I think I just kind of found a balance to crouch low and walk beside the dogs and be as close to them as possible. And part of the reason why I think I was able to achieve some of those shots is because Zeytin is actually quite singular and extraordinary in how she related to me as a camera person. Like she was able to ignore me and let me get so close to her face in a way that most other dogs would react. And it
They
would
would
be,
wanted to engage with you
yeah,
and exchange affection or whatever,
yeah,
communicate
totally,
somehow, whereas
totally.
she really didn't care, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think she's like really cool, like a really cool dog that's like a little standoffish, playful, but for some reason, just like not with me unless I invited her explicitly to. She would, I think she was so sensitive. She kind of knew also what I wanted. She could read what I
Wow, well,
wanted.
that's getting into a whole other sphere if you're
Of course, I'm a believer of
right.
the
Well, I can
extreme.
understand it. She's remarkable, and I defy anybody watching not to sort of buy in it really quickly and feel like they have like an emotional relationship or stake with her and her because it's also worth mentioning that the regardless of its past, the city's situation is that they have a policy, right, of not bothering the dogs,
Yeah,
certainly not collecting them and
yeah. It's a really different
capturing them,
in the
but
States.
they seem
Yeah.
to almost, it's almost like when you're hiking and you're try to do it as you know cautiously, where I know there's a term, but where you don't you try to minimize your impact on everything. So in a way, it's like that with the dogs in Istanbul, where they're not bothered and they're left alone to their own devices. There's a lot of stray dogs.
Yeah, well, I think it's more they're not policed or persecuted the way that they are, I think, in the States.
Right.
Like people are really engaged with the dogs. Like when I would try to put
Oh, they are.
tracking, like GPS tracking collars on the dogs, people would come up to me or my co-producer Zainab and be like, "What is she doing?
Right. They
These
were
dogs are not to be
protective.
taken." Yeah, very protective. And even you see in the film like that the trash collector comes out and decides to intervene in a
That's
fight
right.
of bones, which is extraordinary that he decided to take the time to do that. And everybody was like that. Like everybody was up in everybody's business,
Uh-huh.
including dogs.
Okay.
And so I feel like people are they're communally taken care of. I think there's like a different framework for how they relate to dogs that's very different than the States, where you just manage your own dog if you have one, and that's it. Or you call the police on stray dogs.
But the city has what was I going to say? I just had a thought. It just escaped me for a second. But what I was thinking that the city. I just went completely blank. I apologize. Now,
That's okay.
of course, now I'll have to edit. But no, you brought up something about the dogs, and I just had this, and it was such a brilliant, of course, thought. But about in terms of how the dogs are left alone. I know we were talking about the dogs to their own device, but it's interesting how people had such a protective, uh, you know, protective feeling for the dogs.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and at the same time, oh, I guess what I noticed was that like there's a scene where, oh, I do remember now,
Mhm.
because I was remembering first of all a scene like at the cafe where there's almost like let the dogs do what they want to do, intervene as little as possible, and then I realized there's a significant Muslim population in the city, is there not?
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
it's mixed. There's
okay,
more
because
people
and
and
they
also,
maybe more religious, the more religious folks just don't feel they can touch the dog, that's not something
oh, I
that
think you noticed, yeah, the security guards who are raising the puppies, the black and white puppies, which include cartel, they always pet the puppies with their feet instead of their hands. And that
because
is
they
because
yeah
of their religion. But at the same time, their religion is what asks them to feed those in need, which is why they have this
uh,
routine of feeding them and
uh-huh.
taking care of them, even though they're not touching them, which I think is really interesting too.
Okay, right. Well,
Yeah.
it's a very interesting part of the film. I'm interested when people see it to know what the feeling, what the when the film comes out, which is actually on 5th of March. It's coming right
Yeah,
up. It'll
super
be in
excited.
virtual cinemas here in the States.
Yeah.
And oh, I think I have an information as to where. Okay, so straymovie.com. People can go to straymovie.com and find out what art house cinema they can see this film in. I'm really urging people to support their local art houses and buy a ticket and watch it at home, but at the virtual art house. Um, and you'll be supporting those art houses, and you'll be supporting this film and Elizabeth's filmmaking, which is also really great. And so, um, if you're watching the film and you're paying attention, which is hopefully the case, it's very hard. You're watching very cute dogs. It's hard if you're a dog lover to even think beyond the cute faces of these dogs, and or have a deep concern for their well-being, because they're stray dogs. Where
Yeah,
will they
yeah,
eat next? Where will they sleep safely?
yeah,
Will they get into a fight with a dog that might be stronger? These are worries that you develop very quickly for the dogs. And
yeah,
although we should mention Zayton is a very, very independent, strong,
yep,
willful, you know,
totally.
dog. She can take care of herself very well.
Yeah.
But uh, if you listen to, again, we see that the camera in a way is an extension of the dogs in terms of their perspective, right? Their POV, but so is audio.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
right, conversations leak into this, and then ultimately we develop a bit of a relationship with this group of Syrians
Mm-hmm.
children who
Yeah.
have found home in Turkey, and safety in Turkey,
Yeah.
and yet they live on the streets.
Making
They're also strays, right? I mean, this is not a coincidence, right? Were you trying
yeah.
to suggest something about that, or were you completely taking
No,
a
I don't think I was,
verite approach?
yeah. I mean, I think it was organic to the story. I don't think I was trying to make a statement, sort of connecting the two. I think what people take from it, they will. But I think to deny the kind of relationships that Zayton had with the most marginalized populations in the city would have been very intentionally turned away from the reality of her life. And because she's a stray dog, she has no access to private spaces by the nature of her category of being. And so she's constantly occupying public spaces. And the types of people who are, always in public spaces are going to be people who are either relegated there or have to go there, like the women who are marching for their rights on the streets, the protests, or the young men who are making a living on the streets in the informal economy, or the buskers, the musicians who are on the streets. So I think there was in my mind, when I set out to make a film about stray dogs, I kind of knew that it would sort of be a window into all the sort of lives that are lived on the margins of a city, just by the nature of where a stray dog goes, like the cracks and crevices that Zeytin is drawn to, and the people and other animals she encounters in those spaces.
Right. You didn't edit this film in a way to present the city, is how you felt the dog experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was shooting, I still to this day, I've spent like months and months over the course of 3 years visiting Turkey. But I've yet to go to any of the major tourist sites because all of the times I was with the stray dogs and I would go where they took me. So I think I've seen a very gritty part of Istanbul, and the film is a reflection of that. But I always just kind of stuck with their itinerary and their habitat, where they chose to find food and find company.
Could you have shot this film in could you have done this film in Paris? Could you have done it in Hong Kong?
No way. I wish I could have, because part of the impetus to make this film was also to set it in a society that was going through turmoil, political and social turmoil, and to see what could be revealed if you took a defamiliarized gaze at it through the peripheries of a stray dog population. And Turkey is one of these places that has such a healthy and thriving stray dog population in a way that Hong Kong and Paris, they turned their backs on their dogs. They eradicated them, they killed them. And whenever there's a stray dog there today, there's, either incarcerated for the rest of their lives unless they're adopted, or destroyed. And so this film could only take place in a society that has embraced dogs, who can live on their own terms, instead of only seeing dogs, in a
It makes you
paradigm.
It makes one question what is a domestic animal, truthfully. What is the where are the instincts to survive at the end of the day, and there's all sorts of questions about the dog safety, people safety. Is this a workable thing?
Yeah, it's so, because when I set out to make this film, I also was like, what is it like? Part of my inquiry was, what is it like to live as a being without love and security and status? But what I found in Turkey was the opposite. There's so much love and warmth in a communal sense, and status and security, because they have rights there. And then I realized my whole conception of what the humane treatment of dogs was the opposite. That cities that have large stray dog populations are actually the ones that are treating dogs the most humanely. And the ones that don't, like Paris or New York or Hong Kong, we've actually decided that if you're a dog, if you happen to be born with a dog's DNA, you have no rights at all except to be someone's pet, which is actually insane, because dogs evolved to live on our peripheries, to live off of our trash. They can survive, and they're smart. They can navigate traffic. I've seen them do it in Istanbul. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do it in any American city, except that culturally we find it unacceptable. I know it's a little radical to say all of this, but that's just what
I welcome radical conversation.
I feel really strongly about this. It's really sad.
Yeah. This is a really fascinating part of, as far as I was going to go on to what kind of film were you thinking of making right before you decided to make this film? Or had you been planning I mean, when were you? I was going to ask you about that. Like, when did the inspiration come? Were you planning on working on something? Were you searching for a project at the time? You know,
It was my first feature-length documentary. I'd made a bunch of shorts before,
yeah.
and I think I was
Which,
just
by
kind of
the
naive.
way, people should search them out. She's garnered many awards and attention with her short documentaries. They've appeared in lots of Tony
Oh.
Tony locations or spots anyway. But go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I think when I set out, I was really naive because I was like, I'm going to make a film about stray dogs around the world. And, sort of to do a cultural comparison of how the status of a dog can be so different depending on what culture they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it was a really ambitious project. And even sort of in my mind, it was humanity, the human condition is seen through the eyes of dogs is kind of a ridiculous log line for a first film, especially. But I think because I was naive and embarking on this journey, I kind of just did it. So yeah, and obviously I love dogs, and I think the people who watch this probably love dogs too. And I wanted to really give narrative time and space to beings whose lives aren't necessarily considered, significant enough for a feature-length film or, a book or a story. And yeah, I guess it came from my own childhood dog passing away and me feeling regret at not, grieving him as fully as I should have had we lived in a world that considered him to be equal to humans. So I think the impetus for this film also sprang out of that regret.
Had
And
you
this
read your
film,
Diogenes earlier in life,
yeah, no.
I almost forgot how you throughout the film, your documentary, it's called Stray, by the way, is there are quotes from Diogenes and a couple of other philosophers who really held dogs to a
Mhm.
great esteem, right?
Yeah,
Who believed
yeah,
in dogs, kind of like what we're talking about, that they were
yeah,
species, we were equal as far as species, that there's no
yeah,
hierarchy necessarily, but
yeah. But that we
something
had a lot to learn
it's
from them.
convenient for us to create an hierarchy where we're at the top, right? Because
Completely. And it's the most destructive thing for the world,
yeah,
probably.
I know as I've grown personally, the whole concept of zoos as a spectacle has become really kind of a uh, you know uh, offensive to me, which is something I never thought of as a young person.
Yeah. Actually, one of the first films I made when I was in film school was about zoos, sort of an examination of how weird you bring your kids to, what are you educating them about when you take your kids to a zoo where there's like wild animals behind a piece of plexiglass. Yeah,
Yeah, or if you go a little
it's
further back, even I mean, there are bars, and they just put animals in these small cages, essentially.
yeah,
Back before that, they got more
yeah,
humane, but within the context of a very inhumane situation. Now, there are sort of extensions of often of preserves or of ways of preserving animal life, but
yeah. Actually,
and
making
also I guess financing that.
yeah, making that zoo film was actually what got me into documentaries because I looked at the Central Park Zoo and the
Mhm.
Bronx Zoo in New York, and it was revealed to me in the process of digging into these zoos that there was a human, like African pygmy human, who was housed in the monkey house just over 100 years ago. And after he was released from the monkey house, he committed suicide from all the taunting and obviously extreme racism that would house him there. But this intersection between speciesism and racism and colonialism, those were all issues I cared a lot about. And that's what got me into documentary filmmaking. Realizing like if you just dig a little deeper, there's so much darkness and assumptions that you have to upend as you get to know more. And it was the same in the process of making Stray. My own cultural assumptions were upended by this
I'm
journey.
sure you were grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you say goodbye to Zayton and the other two dogs? I mean, and you've been in Hong Kong, which is not exactly around the corner from Istanbul. So I just wonder if you're how you coping with your goodbye, and
Yeah.
if you have any connection to the dog or dogs
Yeah.
since making the film.
Well, with Kartal, we sadly were never able to find him again.
Mhm.
The police took him. We searched all the shelters,
This
and
was at the scene where with the boys.
yeah, where the
Mhm.
boys were arrested alongside Kartal. But I have a feeling that one of the policemen probably took Kartal in, um, and for his own family, and just didn't want to tell us, because I can't imagine anyone wanting to do harm to that puppy.
Yeah.
But with Zeytin and Nazar, they kind of dropped me off at the hostel that I was sleeping in, and they came to the door. I went up with my gear. I said goodbye to them, and the next morning they were gone. And that was sort of my goodbye with them. And I'll occasionally get updates from Zeynep Koprulu, my co-producer who lives in Istanbul.
Oh, okay,
She'll
right,
run
of
into
course.
Zeytin. She'll run into Zeytin and snap a picture
Oh,
for me and be
wow.
like, yeah, I tried to wake her up, but as always, she did not. She refused.
Sweet, very sweet.
Yeah. So she's
Well,
surviving well during the pandemic.
and you have your film to look at and watch, rewatch, and all the extra footage we don't see, I'm sure too. So you have endless, I'm sure, footage of
Yeah.
Zayton to and her and her friends. Well, thank you very much. Again, Elizabeth Lowe is the filmmaker. Stray is the name of that. Go to straymovie.com again. You can get all the details of how to see it. It's if you've always wanted to be a dog lover and you're not one already, this might help to bring you over the finish line, as it were. Right?
That's the hope.
But I was a built-in fan, so there was no way I wasn't going to talk to you about the film.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do it again.
Yeah. And also for people who are listening or watching,
Mhm.
I think there's a few drive-in screenings coming up, like at the
Oh.
Roxy. I'm not sure in other cities, but I think a
Is
drive-in
that the West? Is that the
West Coast and
Is
the Bay
that
Area.
San Francisco Bay Area? Yeah, Roxy,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
But there probably are a few on the East Coast too. But if you go to Straight
Well,
Movie,
yeah.
it'll-
Well, as a separate subject, I'm sure this summer there will be quite a few drive-ins open, the ones that already exist, as well as pop-up ones, because people want to get back out there and see movies together, right?
yeah, it's sad. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
sad.
Nice meeting you. Thank you. We'll do it. Like I say, we'll do it again, I hope.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Good luck with it. You're welcome. Take care.